Hey everybody, today we've got the best case scenario for the 2025 governor's elections. And because there's only two, we're going to do both the Dems and the Republicans. I last did this 3 months ago, so it's time for a bit of an update. So we've only got two states. It's New Jersey and Virginia. The primary for Virginia is technically next week, but the candidates for governor have already been set for a while now. New Jersey just had their primary, and now we know for sure it's going to be Mikey Sherrill against Jack Ciattarelli. So we're going to start with the best case scenario for the Dems, and there's not much on this map, but let's start with Virginia. So it's Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears for the GOP, and it's former U.S. Rep. Abigail Spanberger for the Dems. She did not run for re-election last time, so she could focus on this race. And Sears, she's already won statewide back in 21, along with Governor Glenn Youngkin. Now, I think it's easy to say that Sears, the Republican, has more of an uphill climb here. A lot of people know that usually the Virginia governor's race tends to go in the opposite direction of the party in the White House. That goes all the way back to the 1970s, but there is one exception. That was in 2013. Terry McAuliffe won even though Obama was in the White House. So right off the bat, the party out of power is going to seem to be more motivated. Now, there's still 4 or 5 months left. That's a lot of time. Most voters tend to pay closer attention in the final month or so. So for right now, let's get on Wikipedia and glance at the polling. Now, one other thing to mention here is at the top, we've got independents, former Republican and former Congressman Denver Riggleman. He's not at all a fan of Trump, and he's still listed here as having formed an exploratory committee. If somehow he made a serious effort and was on the ballot, that'd be another factor and would likely hurt Sears. But for now, we're going to ignore that. We're going to look at the polling. Now, there's a lot of range to these polls, but generally Spanberger has an advantage, and some of them it's significant. A couple of these are close, but some of these are also internals. Now, I don't think this race is too complicated. I think both sides have a decent candidate in their own ways. They both have relevant experience, and they're not no-name candidates. But if we go back to the map, and if we're thinking about the best case scenario for the Dems, there's no question they win this seat, and probably by a comfortable margin. Now, how high can it go? Well, back in 2017, during the first Trump term, we were in kind of a similar situation. Ralph Northam, the Democrat, won comfortably. But even though Trump was really not that popular at the time, it was by less than 10 points. So I do think it would get into high single digits. I don't rule out a 10-point margin, but for the time being, I think that it's just a little bit more reasonable that it just stays inside single digits. I'm looking at 9 to 10 points if the Dems have a great night here. That's going to be enough to put this at a likely rating, just not quite safe. Now let's do New Jersey. Here we've got an open seat. Two-term Democrat Phil Murphy is term limited. The nominees are U.S. Rep. Mikey Sherrill for the Dems and small business owner Jack Ciattarelli. He also spent some time in the state assembly. Now Sherrill seems to be an ideal candidate for the Dems. She's got military and political experience. It seems to give off more of a suburban type of vibe. Now she's considered more establishment, not progressive. And for Jack Ciattarelli, this is his third run at this office. In 17, he came up short in the primary. 4 years ago in 21, he actually came within 3.2% of taking down incumbent Phil Murphy. The polling did not pick that up at all, and now he's running again for the open seat. Now previously, Ciattarelli was viewed as more moderate, and in his primary, which he won comfortably, he did face a challenge from his right. He also did get the Trump endorsement, but like Sears in Virginia, he's going to have to try to walk a fine line. He's going to have to get a good chunk of his own voters from the base, but I would guess he's not going to want to go all in on Trump. He's going to have to present himself as somebody that has a little bit of independence. But if we get on Wikipedia, there is one poll here from the end of May. It shows Sherrill with a 13-point lead. The only issue with this poll is the margin of error is 6.1, and it's sponsored by Mikey Sherrill's campaign. So on a good night for the Dems, I think it's also easy to say that they're going to win this seat. I think Sherrill would be able to get it also by high single digits. But given the movement we've seen in this state in the last presidential and the last governor's election, I think it's a little less likely that this would hit 10 points compared to Virginia. So I would say it's about an 8 to 9 point likely margin here for Sherrill in New Jersey. So that's what I've got for the Dems. Now let's go over to the other side and take a look at the best case scenario for the Republicans. Now we already covered a lot of the background, but let's again focus on Virginia. Again, it's Sears and it's Spanberger. Spanberger has outraised Sears, but that doesn't mean a whole lot. Only one of those two has won statewide so far. Sears is the lieutenant governor under relatively popular Governor Glenn Youngkin. That could be something in her favor. Youngkin did pull off a moderate upset back in 21. Now the difference for him there was Biden was in the White House. This time it's Trump. It's going to be more difficult for Sears. But the polling last time for Youngkin, 4 or 5 months off from the election, it looked like it favored McAuliffe easily. It didn't really start to narrow up until the final month. That's when more people paid attention, and that's when the race really really took shape. So the polling could pan out now for Spanberger, or it could easily tighten up in 3 or 4 months. Now, there's different things you could focus on and some small controversies in the news, but unless Sears has a big scandal of her own, I think a lot of the focus is going to be split between Trump in the White House and Youngkin for governor. How do voters feel about those two and which way the state and the country are moving? Trump is not really popular, Youngkin kind of is. So Sears is the underdog, but if everything lined up just right for her, for right now, as of June, I'm going to say her best case scenario is she is going to get it. It's going to be very close, but I think it would be under 1%. That's going to make this a tilt red for Sears. I think that's a fair rating considering all the different dynamics. But this is on a pretty good night here for the GOP. Spanberger, under most reasonable circumstances, should be able to win that seat. Now let's go on to New Jersey. The best case GOP scenario here is that the state continues to move toward the right, like we saw in the presidential election. And the polling is not going to capture a lot of that Republican vote like it missed last time. A lot of that's going to depend on working class support in South Jersey getting redder, as well as Hispanic support in the Northeast. That's what the Republicans are banking on, especially in the future, as they think the state could actually become a battleground. Now, I think that's too far off for president. And for governor, all Dems really should have to do is not totally wipe out here, and they should be able to win by a small margin. But I do think it's unclear which way some of these voters might move. Yeah, Trump is in the White House. That should make it harder for Chitterelli, and maybe voters are tired of him, given this is his third run. But I think the polling is highly questionable in this state. It was bad for governor last time and for president, so pollsters have might not yet figured out how to poll this changing electorate. So there's some optimism here for the Republicans. The state could move in their direction, but this is not about president. This is for governor. The turnout is going to be lower, and the state is still blue. There's no denying that. The state has elected Republican governors in the past, most recently Chris Christie, and it's an open seat. Voters might want some change here. A lot might depend on how they feel about the Phil Murphy administration. His popularity seems to be kind of in the middle from what I can tell. Not strong, but not totally vulnerable either. I think Mikey Sherrill again has some decent appeal, especially in the suburbs. But in the best case scenario here for the Republicans, we're going to say the lean of the state is not enough to keep it blue. And yeah, the GOP is going to have solid turnout. The trends are going to move a little bit more in their direction. Chitterelli is going to pull it out. It's not going to be anything huge. It's going to be about 1 to 2 points. So that would be enough for this to go leans for Chitterelli. That's what I've got for the best case scenario for both sides. I think it would take a pretty solid night for the Republicans to have success here, especially in Virginia. But I don't want to say it's totally out of reach yet either. I think both sides have decent candidates. The Dems especially just have to tie anything unpopular to Trump and the White House. A lot of that comes down to the economy and tariffs. Maybe some of it comes down to immigration. But Virginia has gotten a lot bluer over the past couple of decades, although most of that is on a presidential level. Prior to that, they were still not a stranger to electing Democrats for governor. And Glenn Youngkin is relatively popular. So there's some question marks in that race, but the Dems should be favored. And New Jersey might be a state with some changing political identity. Republicans think it's going to happen sooner than later. Dems think it's never going to happen. Per usual, I think it might be somewhere in the middle, but the reality is we just don't know. That state has surprised us in the past. So the Dems are in the driver's seat, but if they let their guard down and things line up for the Republicans, there is an opening there, but we'll take a look at it as the months go on and we get closer to the November election. So that's it for the best case scenario for both sides in New Jersey and Virginia. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about either of these two scenarios? How likely is it that you think Dems could hit 10 points in either of these states? And what are the chances Republicans could pick up either one of them? Let me know what your factors are down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to help support the channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.